Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unit 4 of Module 1, Managing Your Own Career. I want to approach this unit rather, from a bit of a different perspective. I want to spend some time talking about some primary research that I conducted with my colleagues. This research is entitled Between Rocks and Hard Places, and it was done with my colleague Suha Ezzedine, who's here with me at York University in the School of Human Resource Management, and a colleague of ours, Susan Baker, who's at Morgan State University in the United States. With this research, what we did was we conducted a series of focus groups with what we've called pre-career women who were enrolled in business programs, which included HR and other parts of business. And the reason why we did this was to gain a better understanding of what people who are at the front end of their career are thinking as they look down their path. They look down towards the possibilities and what their plan is for the future, much like I'm asking you to do within this unit. Now, there are some specifics here, some things to look over. We did focus on people who have not started their career yet, and I understand that many of you out there who are listening to this recording will, of course, have already established a career or you're already on your way. And so you might be able to reflect on this time period in your life, but you may have moved beyond it. We also have focused in this study on women. And as your readings, I think, highlighted quite nicely, that's because there are some differences between how men and women experience early career and their whole career, actually. There are differences. This is a sociologically driven experience. It's largely shaped by our society, and we know that our world treats men and women differently. So I think when we're trying to get the perspective of the individual, it's sometimes important to look at people in meaningful chunks or meaningful groups where they might have shared experiences. We would like to continue this research by looking, of course, at pre-career men. That would be the next phase of this research. But I would like to share with you what we did find from these focus groups, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the study and why we did it this way. So let's start with the question of why focus on pre-career women. Well, first of all, pre-career or emerging adulthood is this time period when you're transitioning from late adolescence into early adulthood. You're receiving all kinds of messages about the choices you're trying to make around career and family, and you're making some fairly significant decisions that will set you on a path. So there's a great deal that happens at this moment in life that really charts the course for the longer term. So this is a really critical time of life because you're making some key decisions about your future. There's less parental oversight, and there's also less structure. So you may be moving out of university where you had a very structured way of being, and there was always this kind of safe experience of being within a structured program, and now you're moving out and you're looking to experiment in terms of career, but it's all entirely up to you how and where you do that. So it becomes this fairly important time of life, not to put too much pressure on the choices you make at this moment in time, as I'll get back to that in a little bit. But it is known to be this difficult time of life, or this time of life where a lot of things are happening. And also in this study, because of the moment in history where we are right now, we are looking at the millennial generation, which I think is important to note. I want to preface that by saying there's more variance across generations than there is within generations. So millennials are very similar to Gen Xers, who are very similar to baby boomers as people. But of course, what happens within a generation is you share a set of experiences, and those experiences that you've shared, or the experiences that you have a significant impact on your life experience and your life trajectory, right? So we know that millennials have been raised with technology, and they're the first generation to enter the workforce with a set of marketable skills that might be at a higher level than the people who are already in the workforce, right? And that's never happened before. So this is a particularly interesting generation. Some of the research out there on this generation has demonstrated or has found that this generation has differing expectations around career and family, a real demand for balance between these two. Sometimes a goals of having high levels of both, which can be somewhat inconsistent and a bit sometimes unrealistic, right? But I think that's also an early career phenomenon, that anybody earlier in their career sometimes sets their goals really high, and they might be adjusted or modified based on life experience. We also know, particularly for women within this generation, there's a significant fear of backlash. Again, that exists across generations. I'm a Gen Xer myself, and I know this is something that my generation had to deal with, and certainly the one that preceded me. And this is this idea of being perceived as unfeminine or unlikable for aspiring to be in leadership or positions of power. There's often this perception of a lack of societal support or familial support for pre-career women. This idea that if you're starting out your career, you have to appear to be ambitious, and it's difficult to lay your cards on the table and demonstrate that, or to state out loud that you have these goals that are beyond your career. Right. So this is a difficult period of life, because you're trying to figure all these things out and balance them. So this is why we chose to focus on this group of individuals. So what did we do? Well, we did a qualitative study. A qualitative study is the type of study where you gather a large amount of text. So we, rather than doing surveys where you try and quantify experiences, we were looking for depth of experiences. So we did focus groups, 14 focus groups in total. Each focus group had 2 to 8 participants, usually 5. So 2 would be when some folks didn't show up. 8 would be when a couple extra folks showed up. Most of these individuals were 21 years of age, and they, as I noted, they're drawn from business programs. And because this research was conducted in Toronto, we had a range of cultural groups, which actually ends up being a very interesting theme within our research, because culture, in addition to gender, also influences how people experience the world and the types of messages they receive about appropriate decisions around career and family. So that will come out in some of our findings. So this is what we did within the focus groups. They were 2 hours long, give or take. They were semi-structured, so I had a set of questions that I would ask. But I left a lot of room for the participants to explore and to talk and to share ideas. I really wanted the group to guide where we went. We asked 3 main questions. We were interested in career goals and aspirations. We were interested in obstacles to career advancement. And we wanted to reconcile this conflict between career and family. We wanted to know what people were thinking. How are you resolving this? And this is something that you can think about a little bit yourself. What are your plans, and how are you balancing career and family? What are you thinking you want to accomplish? And how will you know how that you've been successful? So I'll come back to those ideas, but let's find out what our participants felt in these focus groups. So here's an overview of the key themes that we found after our analysis of the our analysis of the qualitative data. We did a thematic analysis of the qualitative data. We found 4 key themes. The themes were, and I'll go through each theme in specifically, but just to give you an overview, the desire for balance between career and family. There were expressed uncertainties surrounding having it all. There were barriers to career-family balance. And then there was a discussion about how do you have it all? What can you do to have it all? So I'll give you a little bit, we'll dive in a little bit deeper to understand how people expressed these themes. So here's a desire for balance between career and family. A strong desire to have both, a strong desire to be able to have a successful career, or at least a competitive career, and to be able to have all the types of personal experiences, whether that entailed having children or having a spouse or, pardon me, any of these things. There was a real desire to be able to have both of these things. So this is what one of our participants said: "You can be all you want to be and still be a good parent." There was a reluctance to allow one role, one identity to define them, to be all consuming. So somebody didn't want to be just a mother or be just a spouse or just an accountant. They wanted to be many things, right? So the ways in which this was expressed, they expressed this through their own personal experiences, through talking about their own family and their family's life. They expressed it through their values, what's important to them. And they also expressed it through parental examples. My mother did this, my father did this. Sometimes contrary examples, right? My mother was always at work and never at home. I don't want to be that. I don't want that to happen to me. I want to be able to be a career person, but also be there for my kids. So there was this need to balance, right? So the desire for balance, here's a quote that I think articulates it really well. If work is going to take over my life, then I don't want that for me personally, because I saw it with my dad. He was working all the time, so he didn't get to us as much, only on the weekends. And my mom was there 24/7. Personally, I feel more comfortable with my mom than my dad, so I don't want that to be the case with my children. Right? That's theme one. So let's move on to the next theme, understanding our uncertainties rather surrounding having it all. So I want it all. I don't want to be just one thing, but at the same time, I don't know if that can happen. I'm a bit nervous about whether or not that can be accomplished. So there's equally strong awareness of the challenges surrounding having it all. Here's a quote. You can't have a really good job and a really healthy family life at the same time. So a flat out, it's not possible. And these are the reasons that were given across all participants as to why this is the case. It's not possible, not even for men. Work and parenting are equally demanding. You'll have to, they will compete with one another, these two roles, and you'll have to make trade-offs. Some people talked about not wanting to have kids because they felt that would interfere with their career path. And then if they did have kids, they want it to be quite late so that they could have already established them for a career. So as they could have already established themselves within a career. So there's this idea that we need to make choices. It's not you can't be all things. You can be one or the other, but not both, right? So here's a quote again that I think illustrates this theme fairly well. I think it's the nature of the beast. I think it's just the way our society is. It's very difficult to mirror the two, especially with the demands that career puts on you and motherhood puts on you. I think trying to do both, in some sense, you're killing yourself. Your career isn't going to wait for you, and your kids aren't going to wait for you. Okay, so this is uncertainty, expressed uncertainty. So let's move to the next theme. We also saw some barriers to career-family balance. So now we're digging deep and identifying what are the things that are going to get in the way specifically. And here are some of the obstacles that people within our focus groups identified. Organizational barriers, family pressures, societal norms or social norms, and cultural expectations. So the organizational behaviors, or barriers rather, that we see are inflexible or inhospitable to workers with families. So an organization that doesn't support families or workers. Discrimination due to mandated maternity leave and childcare. So there's variance there's a need to take, if you have a baby, there's a need to take some sort of leave. And even if it's a short leave, that time away from there's fearfulness around that time away from the workplace. And then if you really want to take a longer leave, what are the consequences of being away from the workplace for an entire year? What happens when you return? Does the organization and the people within the organization, do they continue to support you? There's also family pressure. Caregivers within their own families. There's expectations within a family and what is your role? What are your expectations? What are you supposed to be doing? Social norms. Again, this is the gender piece around what's the expectation. And in this particular case, for you as a daughter, for you as a granddaughter, for you as a mother, what are the things that you're supposed to be fulfilling? Cultural expectations. The conflict between the current culture and the culture of origin. So the notion that I'm being raised in North America and being raised in Toronto, But there are expectations that my parents expected this from me because of our religion, or they expect this from me because of the country that these are the traditions that are consistent with our family values. So that certainly can cause some tensions. So here are some quotes that do a very nice job of articulating these barriers. So starting with organizational barriers, I think it's an unspoken barrier. If me and a gentleman have the exact same qualifications, I wouldn't be surprised if they were hired first or he was hired first. Just for the simple fact that maternity leave costs the company money. And I think in the back of everyone's mind, it's always the bottom line. So I definitely think that's a barrier. I think that probably psychologically it affects why I don't want to have kids. So there's some real deep content in there around this person making choices based on what she perceives to be the expectations of others. The second quote here is around family pressure. If my dad got older, he's already sick and he's in his 60s. I'm the only family he has. It's weird because I feel like we think we sacrifice as parents, but I think we also sacrifice as children. Right? So the expectations of what are the roles you will have to fill, all these varied roles, and how will they influence and impact on your own career trajectory. Moving on to social norms. It's funny. We do 3 to 4 years of school and we're taught all these different values. Oh no, men can stay at home, women can go to work, and it's all rainbows and sunshine. But what you learn in school is very different from what you see in the workplace. Right? So these high-minded ideals that we have around equality and what it actually looks like in practice, this perception that it's inconsistent. And lastly, cultural expectations. I'm from Pakistan and I'm from a Muslim family. So even though my family is quite modern, but there are still constraints, and still they don't allow me for so many things I want to do. Yeah, it's difficult. I'm kind of stuck. It's very different for a man, yes. So there's still some other expectations that are brought on by culture. And finally, this theme of how to have it all. So now we've identified that there's a tension in work-life balance. There's some themes around what are the obstacles, but what are some of the solutions that were offered by people in this group? How do you move forward balancing both career and family? So this again is from folks who are at the early stages, who are developing these solutions based on projection or expectations of the future rather than on lived experience. It's important to point that out, but it's also important to see the hopefulness in some of these statements. So pursuing our own definitions. Now this is an important one that's also reflected in your readings. We have to develop our personal definitions of career and family and what success means. Personal definition of having it all. If I define what success means for myself, and don't allow the definitions of others to influence that or to impact on my own assessment of my own level of success, there's a greater chance that I can end up in a place where I'm actually engaged and satisfied with my life. Managing oneself. So deliberate career and family planning, taking responsibility. So making deliberate choices, planning out a path for yourself, not allowing yourself to just fall into one thing or another, but ensuring that you are making clear choices that are taking you towards a destination. And we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll ask you to reflect on that in just a few moments. Next is, of course, making career choices for yourself. A lot of people talked about making their own choices, not allowing others to influence how those choices are made. And some folks talked about sequencing work and family. So not only planning work and career, but also planning how family would happen, when you would have children, how you would have children, so that for a few reasons, so that you could invest in career or perhaps even delay the investment in career in order to care for young children. Or you could balance it with a partner or a spouse. So trading off was another strategy that people talked about, right? So the last little bits to talk about here are how other factors that people talked about in terms of having it all. And some of this was around social support. So ensuring that you have a network of people around you that are willing to validate your choices and then support you as you try and implement them. A huge theme was this idea of choosing your life partner carefully. So we had folks talk about that they are a diehard feminist, or they would like to choose somebody who shares the same views that they do. And there was also some articulation of men and women being on different wavelengths, and the need to make sure that you choose a partner who sees the world the way you do. So some quotes I think that articulate some of these themes quite well. Redefining family. I think our definition of family varies here, but family could be anything. When I think of family, I'm not thinking just about a husband and 2 kids. I'm thinking of family, all my relatives, my friends, possibly kids, possibly someone. Family just doesn't start when you have kids. Some folks talked about managing themselves. I've seen people that work full-time jobs, full-time school, and they still maintain a good life. It just depends on how you manage your time. When we talk about sequencing, this idea of trading off or delaying, I think I can have both, but not at the same time. I'm not going to divide my life in different pieces. Before 30, I'm going to choose not to have children. I'm totally committed to work, and I'm going to achieve that goal. When it's time for me to have a family, I'm going to quit 3 and 4 years and just take a break. I'm going to switch my character to stay at home to enjoy family. If later on I'm bored with all the housework, then I'll go and look for another job. So this is the sequencing idea. Social supports. I think it's funny that the problem can be solved so simple, that all you need is the social support for you to be okay with your career. Whether it's friends, whether it's family, whether it's partner, doesn't matter, right? Just knowing from that environment around you that it's okay, that it's okay to be like that, right? So here is a quote about choosing life partners carefully. I think it can be done, but it depends on women standing up and saying, you need to do this too. You can't just expect me to come home every day and do millions of different things and you watch TV. We need to demand stuff from them too. I think we can't allow them to continue this trend. We need to stand up and take a break and break through that glass ceiling. Right? So there's some fear of what's possible and taking responsibility for helping others understand what you need from them. So again, lastly, about the study, looking ahead and reflecting on having it all, we saw within our focus groups a real maturity, some realistic viewpoints, a wider scope of what's possible. So not just not restricted to career and family, but focusing on hobbies, contributions to society, thinking about what really jazzes them in terms of their passions. And then this question of, well, then if I do all of this, then what? What motivates me? Right? So the conclusions that we reached with this study is that there is a real desire for balance, that there's a real desire to have it all. And that the people in our sample were very aware of the challenges. Now, they expressed a set of challenges that had to do with a particular segment of the population. But again, everybody has a set of challenges, and I think this group articulated a set of challenges quite well. And they also identified potentials for solutions to the conflict. So. I think this study did a very nice job of giving you some ideas of what people are thinking about at this stage of their career. And I hope that these are things that you're thinking through and considering as you prepare for your careers. Now, a few things that I want you to do as part of this unit are to think about some of the questions that we thought about in this study, right? Where will you be in 5 years? And what has to happen between now and then in order for you to get there? What are your objectives? And when you're thinking about this, as our sample in the study pointed out, it's not sufficient to just think about your career. Life is bigger than that. And we know from research that folks are really interested in figuring out how to make it all fit together. And that is not a gender issue. That is a cross-gender. That is a life issue that there's a real need to figure out where you will be and who you will be. Now, if you can look ahead at 5 years, and then you can spend a little bit of time looking ahead to 20 years and even beyond that, to get a sense of what are my short-term goals, what are my long-term goals, how will I define success? What does success look like for me? Now, here's the catch, right? You set your goals and you set them high and you plan for success, but ultimately there will be some setbacks, some obstacles, some failures. What will you do when you are faced with those? Now, from your readings and from some of the material that you've been exposed to so far for this course, we know that failure provides an opportunity. It's an opportunity to figure out what is working, what is not working, whether we need to adjust our goals, our short-term or our long-term goals. What can we learn? What do we understand about ourselves based on these setbacks? In addition to failures, it's also important to understand your success. Now, my complaint would be not enough people do this. So I think one of the issues with failures is when we sit down and we assess our failures, we often ruminate on our failures and spend a lot of time in a spiral of either blaming ourselves or berating ourselves for not having performed in the way that we wanted, rather than trying to figure out what next and what do I do with this setback. With our successes, we spend, and I think we're all guilty of this. We spend our time congratulating ourselves for our success without figuring out how do we understand that success as a way to help us build future successes, right? So success is an opportunity to reflect on what worked, what didn't work, even within our success. What strengths did I demonstrate? What strengths do I have that I can leverage and use in future in future efforts, in future tasks, in future work situations? And also not only my own strengths, but what were the circumstances around me that really supported my success? So I was speaking with somebody recently who was having a great deal of trouble at work, and it had been going on for quite some time. And something that she came to in our conversation was that when she is at her best, when she is performing at very high levels, she is surrounded by people that she enjoys working with. So some of the circumstances for her success are to be with people who keep her motivated, not in that they are supporting the task at hand, but they're just making it a good place to be, right? So that ends up being important for her. So what's important to you? What supports your success? All right, so this was a bit of a different unit. I hope you enjoyed the presentation on some of the primary research that we had done. This is a paper that is under review right now for publication. It's already been presented at a couple conferences. But I hope it gives you something to think about. I will open up a discussion board that will give you a chance to reflect on some of the themes. I'm sure there will be things in here that you disagree with and things that you agree with. Again, these are reflections shared with us, so they're not necessarily opinions. They are opinions of the researchers. They are a representation of a pattern of comments that we observed within our data collection. So I'd love to hear your insights, and I'd also love to see what you're thinking about with respect to your own career progression and your own career development. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next unit. Bye-bye.